There's a lot of talk lately about mindfulness in everyday life. What about bringing that awareness of your purpose into your small business? So far today, have you been just busy? Have you been acting with your purpose in mind? Well, on today's show, we're talking with one of my favorite guests. I mean, this guy's on the Mount Rushmore of interviews, Dave Marlow from Vluru LLC, about mindfulness in the workplace. Welcome to Idea Collective Live, the official weekly meeting of small business owners everywhere. I'm your host, Pat Miller, the Idea Coach. Thank you to our sponsors, Bank 59, Quick Trip, and Serendipity Labs. David Noel on the call. What's up? And of course, the Idea Collective collaboration community for small business owners. It's great to see you all here today. Now, the show is interactive and we film it like a TV show, but we want you to be a part of it, especially with such an important topic as mindfulness at work. So if you have questions, comments, sarcastic remarks, whatever they are, put them into the chat because everything gets better when we have the conversation. Plus, we will hang out after the show and we will have our Quick Trip networking after party so we can meet everybody in the crowd and reflect on some of the things that I'm sure we're going to learn. And we have two exciting announcements of new things we're doing for the Idea Collective. One is a small business survey of Midwest small businesses, and another is a fun contest that we're doing with Quick Trip. So with that, let's get centered and let's get into it. It's time to talk with our guest, David Marlow, who's the founder and CEO, head boss guy, big brain at Vluru LLC. He's a nationally recognized leader in personal and corporate transformations. Dave led transformations at 3 Fortune 500 companies, as well as small companies in roles ranging from senior management to an executive level. In addition to executive coaching and corporate transformation, Dave is a highly sought after speaker delivering keynotes at global business conferences such as AT&T's B2BI Customer Conference, Fusion's IT Conference, and most recently, Global OpEx 2020. Throughout a 30-year career, Dave has helped hundreds of people and businesses find fulfillment in their lives, careers, and products through his coaching, consulting, and mentoring. In the midst of his own transition, he was able to put a name to the practice of helping people find their purpose, Ikigai. Dave has created a process and framework around Ikigai to help people and businesses uncover their purpose and to bring that purpose into their lives and the lives of those around him. Dave Marlow, with all that, it's great to see you. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Really excited to be here. As we talked about earlier, if everyone bears with me, I've got Wisconsin spring-itis here. I've got allergies or something. I will project. All right. I'll try and remain calm, but project.
I'm looking forward to it. You always have such insightful things to say, and I'm confident that the people on the call will get a lot out of it. So let's start at the beginning. There's a lot of buzz, and I like to think some growing awareness around mindfulness, but let's make sure we're all tracking. This might be too big of a question to start off with, but how would you define mindfulness?
Sure. At its basic levels, mindfulness is being present in the moment, being focused on where you're at and what you're doing. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but right now. Especially in a work environment, we are pulled 50 million different ways, right? I know what really prompted me to dig into this was the day where I was getting text messages. I was checking my email on my phone. I was on my computer at the same time I was checking messages on my phone. My IP phone was ringing and somebody was trying to talk to me and I was trying to balance all of that. It's like, I can't think about anything. I wasn't present in any one of those conversations or activities. And being able to slow that down and focus on one thing and really be present in that is what we want to talk about today.
When you say that, slowing things down and focusing on one thing, we hear people talk about switching tasks and time management, but this is really something a little bit deeper, right?
Right. Much different than time management. That's valuable, certainly. But this is about being able to actually be in that moment and think about one thing at a time and to work on, I call it monotasking, right? We try and do multitasking. And we know from studies that our brains won't actually multitask. We're stopping, starting with all the loss in between. But to be able to focus on one thing and really put yourself into that it's twofold, really. It's key to productivity, but the other is really to enjoying life and to living into your purpose.
And that's what we're going to talk about later, which I'm excited about. Let's talk about,
Yeah.
what does mindfulness mean for people in business and their careers? If we can become more mindful in what we do with our profession, how does that help us?
Yeah. So, our lives, our work lives especially, are filled with busyness. There's a lot of distraction, which leads to procrastination, responding to messages because we're looking for quick hit, feel good accomplishments. Um, like I said, checking on messages, just getting lost down rabbit holes. And we struggle to focus on actual meaningful work. And while we feel like we've done some things and we feel that level of busyness and checking emails feels good, we're not getting anything done. And the impact to business, aside from the personal impact of the feelings of frustration and lack of productivity, is actual loss of productivity. Um, it's really easy to get caught up in pulling away, getting pulled away, allowing ourselves to be called into meetings. I used to work in IT, and I worked with people who they loved getting a text. They loved it. It was like, oh, I'm on. And it gave them an excuse to drop working on something that maybe they weren't, 100% sure of, and to go to something that was easy. I'll go to a meeting. I'll respond to an email. I'll do those quick hit things. But mindfulness is really about focusing on the important things and the things that are going to matter, not just in this moment, but in the moments to come.
How come those texts feel good? How come feeling busy feels good? And if mindfulness is how we arrive at working at the big, meaningful stuff, sometimes that's not as exciting. How come those little things just feel good to like get wrapped up in?
Yeah, it's really dopamine, right? I mean, we do something. I read an email, I respond to you with it. I feel like I've accomplished something. It trips that brain into feeling like we've actually done something. It's much the way social media is framed and created to get that quick response, feel good. Okay, now I'll check it again. I'll check it again and check it again. Um, and it's using our brains and the positive thing about a dopamine hit against us, and leads us down paths that, again, procrastination is often, I don't want to face looking at a problem and having to actually go into it and maybe solve it. But I got these 25 emails and I really got to get those done. So I can easily justify dropping the important work that might be hard to go check those 25 emails. And then I see those 25 emails done. Hey, I accomplished something today.
So, we're going to talk about the purpose and we're going to talk about some tips on how to become more mindful at work in just a minute. But let's look at it from an organizational point of view. If you bring mindfulness into your workplace and your business, can you give us some examples of how it can move it forward and where being mindful makes it a better workplace?
Yeah. So, um, much like we were talking about, so you've got a whole host of individuals who are working in busy environments, who are um, often bored because they're not really doing productive work, and yet they're getting that dopamine hit. They're focusing on the urgent things, not the important things. It's not really investing time in those long term projects or long term efforts. It's almost looking for the quick hit, easy response things. So the work being done is not the high productivity work, not the long term high value work. It's those quick hits. And let's say, for example, I'm your boss and I'm getting that thrill from emails. Now I'm emailing you, and now you're bogged down, right? And then you email me back, and then I email you again. The other is leaders in leadership development. Studies have found that mindful executives are significantly, as much as 40% more productive and providing greater leadership depth than executives without that skill set. And again, it's in part because they can take that moment and focus on the important things rather than the things that feel good or give us a sense of temporary accomplishment.
And that's something that the teammates can sense. right? When they have a boss that's present and worried about the big stuff, not the splashy stuff, it almost radiates off of them, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And when we're not sure about the path to take, we know we should be focusing, but we also got all these other important tasks to do. We'll drop that important thing, and the team senses that. They sense where your focus is at, or lack of focus. Um, the other is you tend to develop the bad habits of getting those quick hits, maybe at 10 o'clock at night. So I might be emailing you at 10 o'clock at night, and you're sending the wrong messages at that with that kind of behavior as well.
Mhm. All right. So we've talked a little bit to introduce the concept of mindfulness and why it can help you in your business. Let's talk about the thing that you really love talking about. And I just love hearing you talk about this, your passion in life to help people find their purpose, their Ikigai, right? I said it right. Ikigai,
You
right?
did, you did.
Yes. I've been
Bonus
practicing all
points.
morning. Bonus
Well,
points. So,
well done.
thank you. So, define the concept for us and how this fits into our purpose in life.
Sure. Well, ikigai is a Japanese combination word, which means life purpose. And at its most basic level, a lot of people come to understand it as a convergence of what you're passionate about, what you're good at, what people need, and what the world values or is willing to pay for. Um, you know me, I like to go a lot deeper with that, and we'll link back to that when you talked about work. But your ikigai is really your purpose and your reason for getting up in the morning. And living into that purpose is the unique expression of you, your gifts, your passions, your skills, all that encompasses you being you and your place to impact the world. And when you're spending your time doing that, what only you can uniquely do, that special combination of personality and interest make you unique in all the world. And then what really gets me fired up is helping people then see how they can become the best in the world at being themselves and being that and fulfilling and living into that purpose.
Why does this speak to you so much? Why are you so passionate about this?
Yeah. So if you mentioned earlier in the intro that going back even 30 years when I was 5 years old, um, can't can't hide it with this hair color. It's
Uh,
kind of hard to
yeah, yeah.
hide. But I've been around the block. Um, Going back, what I found was those moments when I was most fulfilled, and I've had a varied career. So I'll start by saying that Ikigai is about purpose over profession. Profession is a way and is important, and we all have to make a living. It's not so important that like you have a single thing that you can do, as much as you have you and that inner purpose, and there's a lot of ways to manifest it. So when I would look back over my career, which included being a disc jockey, so I was in radio and TV. I have a face for radio, so it's mostly radio. um, you've heard that joke and you're
Oh,
still
yeah.
laughing. I
Oh, I've
appreciate it.
heard it a
Good
lot.
job.
Trust
You've
me on
heard,
that. Oh, yeah.
um, I was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. I was an engineer working on MRIs, an engineer working on in or the early days of IT. Went over to the dark side and became an executive at some Fortune 500 companies. Continuous improvement, eighth grade girls basketball coach. All of these things, right? Um, all of these things had common elements, and that was where I was helping people be the best that they could be. And for a long time, I saw those as elements of continuous improvement and things like that. But at its core, it really comes down to helping people uncover what they're all about and what really drives them, and then giving them the tools and the means to live that out and manifest that in a productive way. If I could give you a real quick example of one of my clients, uh, one of my clients was a pastor, and he unfortunately got cancer very bad and was able to overcome it. But as a result of that, he just wasn't able. He didn't have the energy and the stamina to be a full-time pastor and commit to people. And yet, he still had that heart, right? He still had a heart for sharing that kind of information. And he also has a an amazing ability to grasp like quantum physics. Okay, so like, where the heck are you going, Dave? But we worked through the Venn diagram I shared with you earlier about his purpose and his passions. And then we talked about the various, people that he might serve and the things that they might be willing to pay for. And he wrote a number of books, science fiction books that have a religious overtone. So you've got quantum physics and God, right?
Hmm.
But where we were working and where some of my coaching comes in, his skills, we had to look at that skill window. And he's an excellent writer, very bright guy. But as you can imagine, writing dialogue for a novel is very different than writing a good article on quantum physics, right? And so by having that conversation, we found a way to up his skills, get some editing support as well as some training, so that he has a better delivery of that and that manifestation of that purpose and passion. So Ikigai is really uncovering what's in there, what you are. I don't even like the word discover, because that implies you got to find it when it's really there. And what happens to us is we have that, especially when we're kids, and then life happens and disappointments happen and bills have got to get paid and all these things kind of cover it up. And the task of Ikigai is to uncover that. And then the work that I do in coaching or others is about helping people find a way to then live into that and live it out through manifesting it.
So, how do they perform when they rediscover or become aware again of their ikigai? What does it do for them when they're in touch with it?
Yeah. So if you think about the time when you were just doing something that you were so into that hours had passed and you didn't even realize it, that's when you're in your ikigai. That's when you're doing what you were uniquely created to be, and that moment of manifestation of it and being in that moment. I mean, that is the purest form of ikigai. Now, granted, we're not going to all be able to every single moment, but the idea is the deeper you understand that, the more you can begin to pivot your career around those things that give you the most satisfaction and offer you the most opportunity. So myself, for example, I had $200 million budget I managed as a VP of a division. I am I don't say the world's worst accountant. I'm not the world's worst accountant. I can do the math and things like that. I hate it. I hate it. And whatever I could do to limit that was helpful to me to then focus on the people development, the innovation development, things like that. And so while you have to accept a certain amount of things that are really in service to your ikigai, doing that, um, it's helpful to understand that ikigai so you can say no to certain things or look for ways to get that either outsourced, done by somebody else, or
Mhm.
get better at it so you can get done with it. If I could share a quick story about Larry Winget. If you know Larry Winget's a nationally recognized speaker. I know Larry, and one thing he shared with me, he's like, I love speaking. He goes, I love speaking. I love being up on the stage. I love telling my stories, and he's got some awesome stories. Google him and look at his YouTube stuff if you get a chance. He goes, and that's about an hour a day out of my week. He goes, the rest of it's flying somewhere and scheduling and booking and coming up with and refining the stories. And so for him, his Ikigai space is really sharing those valuable insights in a way that people can absorb. But you have to recognize too that there'll be parts of your day that are going to be flying between cities for where Larry.
So, does this all begin with being mindful? Is that how we start to rediscover our ikigai, by being aware of what lights us up and when time flies and we're not paying attention? Is that the first step?
Yeah. So if you think back to that example I gave earlier about, I'm on my phone. I actually had two. I had two phones. um, so I've got like one phone on the desk, kind of fingering that and doing that. I've got my desktop. There's nothing about that that enables me to go deeper and spend some time in reflection, right? Nothing. Not to mention, I have probably burned through most of the positive carbohydrates I have in my brain, right, that are needed for innovation and thinking. It's that quiet mind that really allows you to do the reflection and allows you to spend that time. We have 10 rules of Ikigai, and one of them is to reconnect with nature, and and others to live in the moment. And until you can do that, at least for part of your day, it is very, very difficult to have the emotional capacity to invest in understanding who you are at your deepest levels.
And something as simple as a sentence as living in the moment is really profound, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
living in the moment is really, really hard. Why is it so hard?
Well, because we like to I mean, the world likes to be busy, right? We enjoy it. People brag about it. They put the stuff on their Facebook page on how busy they are. Um, I can tell you from my days in corporate, um, I don't know that I would ever have put it in my self review, but the most productive I was when I was sitting in my office in the quiet and actually just pondering, just thinking about things. Now, dear boss, I spent an hour doing nothing today, right? Not, no. They wanted. I went to 3 meetings. I went to this. I checked my 2 phones, and right. So we're rewarded for activity oftentimes in business, which, to your earlier question, what's important for leaders to know? You've got to reward and set up a system where you're allowing people and then rewarding them for doing that, for spending that time in reflection, for spending that time even just walking. One thing I appreciate about my last job, if you will, is they had a campus where we could walk, where there was plenty of space to go walk and do a lap around I think it was a mile and a half around the campus. Um, but even then, that was there, and yet we were discouraged from doing it because how many things did you get accomplished today?
Yeah. And it seems like walking is one of these socially acceptable ways of doing nothing,
Like,
right? Like if you say, "Hey, I'm going to take a break and go for a walk," everyone's like, "Oh, great. Good for you. Close those rings." But to your point, if you said, "I'm going to close my door and think for a half hour," people would be like, "Oh, he's taking a nap. He's being lazy." And maybe that's one of the reasons why walking is so it's a part of a lot of the leadership culture. I mean, don't a lot of the leaders talk about walking and thinking and how that's part of what they do?
yeah, especially I'll say in like a lean or continuous improvement culture, one of the things is to leading by walking around. I mean, literally go to the Gemba and go experience um, experience what the people are experiencing, and it's more than walking. It's being, again, present, and being in that moment. And you don't have to be even completely quiet. So as an example, um, I want to be present here with you. I want to hear your questions. I want to understand what it is that you're wanting to know. I don't have music going on in the background for obvious reasons, but I mean, if we were just chatting, I wouldn't have that either. I don't have any other devices up or anything that's going to pull me away, because I want to be all in and be present in our conversation, so that I'm really understanding you, and honestly giving you the gift of my attention, right? And when you think about a leader, I mean, what gift can you give to your people more than truly listening to them and understanding what they're saying, what they're feeling, and being present with them. um, so let's pretend. So you come into my office and we're talking, and I'm thinking about 75 meetings I got down the rest of the day. How much value are you getting out of that? And you can tell, even if
Totally.
it's not a conscious thing, it's there. I'm already in the next thing, and I've got budgets to check off and all the things, right? But if I stop, and even my body language says, "Hey, I'm listening. Pat, how's it going today? Tell me about your day." And then I don't talk, right? I I wait and I wait until you finish your thought. I don't wait until the period, right? And then start my talk. Um,
Yeah.
that's a level of being present too. So it's more than just be quiet and doing nothing, although those are really, really valuable. It's being with that person you're with, and no one else, and not checking your phone, and not checking, your the back processing of your brain, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
And as a style point, I think the people that are really present and very calm and are able to divert their lighthouse of attention just to you, it's magnetic. I think people respond to that in a way of, oh my, like it's almost unsettling to have someone really focus on you in that way. And it makes everything so much easier. It's something I'm definitely trying to get better at. So here's what we're going to do. We've got some time left with Dave. We want your questions because now we're going to turn into how can we incorporate more mindfulness into our workday? Because many of us are trying to do that and it's really, really hard. So if you have questions, put them into the chat and we will work them into the conversation. So let's just go there. We understand that we can call you and we can work with you to work on our Ikigai and be more in our purpose. And that's incredible. But we can all take steps, I mean, immediately to improve our mindfulness during the workday. So where would you start sending us on that journey?
Sure. So the first thing is, even just when you wake up, right? Just when you wake up, what are you thinking about? Stop, sit at the edge of the bed, take a breath. Just take a breath. Be in that moment. I forget what percentage. It was like 64% or something of people. The first thing they think about when they get up in the morning is, I don't have enough time. You are not going to be mindful if that's like your preset, right? So take that moment and just give yourself a second to breathe and enter the conscious world. Okay. And then start with your purpose in mind. Start thinking about, what's my intention for the day? Take 3 long. I've started teaching my grandson this, and he's 6, and I love it because he does this. I asked him where he got that because I don't teach this.
This, yeah.
He goes, oh yeah. He goes, from a commercial. He saw something on a commercial, but he's think about it. With a 6-year-old, he's like 15 different ways. And I say, let's take a moment and take a breath, and he'll do that. Okay. We're all 6 years old too. Some of us have white hair, right? Or none.
Or none.
Right?
That's
Or
true.
none, yeah. So take those 3 deep, like nourishing breaths and just sort of release that tension and do that. And then ask yourself, there's some really good introductory questions. What's my intention for today? What do I want from today? If it's, I want to get 7 meetings done, go back to the breathing and start again. No, it's like, what do I want for my life? I want to live into my Ikigai. I want to be present. I want to connect with the people that I actually engage with today. I want to have a real conversation with Pat Miller, right? That kind of thing. So that's a good thing. Just, what's my intention? Ask yourself that. How might I show up today to have the best impact on the things that are most important to me? That's a big one. Just, how might I show up? I can almost guarantee you, if you're pondering that sort of thing, you begin to change your behavior. You're not checking your calendar and email it back and forth, because there's just no way to do the important things if you're doing that. So setting that frame as you start off your morning is super powerful, and doing nothing more than just asking the question, because our brains are geared to move into the answer for a question. So the more questions we can ask, the more we can drive our behavior, even subconsciously. Another good question to start off your day: what do I need to do to take better care of myself? So if that's something you're pondering, you're probably not going to grab a sandwich, go back to your desk and eat it and type and do that, right? Because you want to take better care of yourself. You might go for that walk. You might eat something better. You might throw some oranges into there instead of just some chips, right?
Let's reflect on this for a second, though. I
Okay.
understand the power of the questions, and I understand the power of intention, and I understand I need to be better at it. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I hear what you're saying is what I mean to say, and I can see how that would set us on a good course. How do we compete with the dopamine that you talked about earlier of making those fast hit actions with these bigger, deeper questions? If we're waking up and being mindful of how can I live my purpose today, that's not exactly like, you're going to press a button and a candy bar comes out. Like, how can you compete with the short form dopamine of the other choices when you're trying to live a bigger purpose?
Sure. It's a very fair question, because we're wiring our brains every day. we're wiring our brains for behavior and for what's going to give us a reward and give us satisfaction every day. And when we've done that, when we've done the dopamine hit thing, right? Checking Facebook, checking this, checking that, we have wired our brain. So it does take time, and that's one thing that that you got to give yourself a little time with that, in terms of knowing that I'm feeling like I'm dying to check my iPhone here, right? But again, that goes back to that level of awareness and just starting that process and giving yourself some rewards for doing the right thing. So the morning technique is really good for you to take that moment, do it, and then ask yourself, how do I feel? I don't feel as rushed. That's a good thing. And you begin to reward yourself in those ways. Having had a really good conversation with another person and have that level of deep listening, that feels pretty good too. Now, again, if you've got 100,000 hits in your brain of email response and one morning reflection and breathing, you got to do it a few times, right? It's not 100,000, but it takes a little time. So it's really being aware and committing yourself to that. I could tell you, when I started doing that, and I'll talk a little bit about breathing meditation, which is not a deep or complex thing, but just doing breathing meditation released me from so much tension that I was like, why aren't you doing this? I got to do this more, right? And that became my reward, if you will, that sense and feeling of a lot more peace, and being present for my family and things like that, and looking for those kinds of moments.
Yeah, that's really great. We have some questions that are coming in, and if you have questions, drop them into the chat. I'm not surprised Ariel Kopak has a question. Can you differentiate between mindfulness and meditation? You just mentioned it. If you can use mindfulness to generate creative ideas and to work better, how does that differ from meditation? Is there a different intention or purpose for each?
Yes. So mindfulness really is being present, being focused, and being there in that moment. Meditation is a I'll say a method. That's probably not the best word, but a way to develop a level of mindfulness and to practice that. So the meditation I was talking about, very simple, has no connection to any religious practices directly. Obviously, it supports a number of faiths, incorporate meditation, but you're really just training the mind to be mindful. And so the meditation is the kind of tactical, practical practice of it. And being mindful is when you're being fully present and thinking about that one thing at one at a time.
And by using one, you can get better at the other. They kind of work together, is
Correct.
what I'm hearing you say?
Correct.
Okay.
Hmm.
Great question, Ariel. Thanks. Brad has a question. What is the best learning experience and lesson you received in your career? What were the
Like,
results? I know that's a
wow.
big for someone. Okay, so this when you talk to Dave Marlow, it's like talking to Walter Mitty. The guy has done everything on the planet. It's fascinating. So, of all the things you've done and all the advice you've been getting, like what can you think of one that really kind of affected you and got you great results?
Yeah, I'll share one that was foundational. It's probably been reinforced in various ways, but I'll go back to the touchy feely days of my time in the Marine Corps. Um, uh, we Just to give you a foundation, there were 96 of us in boot camp. 96 people from all over the country, every different background and education level and income level, and they put us all together, and we had to go for a run. So one of our first runs, and they're encouraging us to hurry, all right? And so we all throw on our shorts and t-shirt, which they gave us, and literally the only thing we brought from home were running shoes. I was one of the first group to be able to actually use Asics Tigers. Still love those shoes. Instead of combat boots. So we throw them on, and we throw on the only socks that we were issued, which were green wool socks in San Diego in July.
Mm.
So we get back, and we come back from the run, and the DIs are looking at it, and they're questioning our intelligence, right? They're like, what are you morons doing? You're running in green socks, in wool socks, rather. Tomorrow, every single person in this unit will have white athletic socks to run in. And then they sort of like left it to us to figure out. Well, now trust me, it's not like we could go to Target. We're in boot camp, and uh, like, well, what are we going to do? So we start talking, we start exchanging, and there's a certain incentive, if you will, of pressure from the DIs to find a solution. But the next morning, and several people, we had done a quick run through, I forget what they call it, but it was just, they had like soap stacked up and deodorant, some stuff. And we had like 2 minutes to run through and grab something the first day we were in boot camp. And some guys had grabbed socks, and some others had worn theirs. And anyway, the next morning, all 96 of us had a pair of white socks on when we ran. And it opened my mind to the possibility that, what if we don't accept the impossibility of the task, and add and. It's like, and that's one thing I learned in the Marines throughout my Marine Corps time, was we were facing all kinds of obstacles all the time, right? Some very, very serious, as you can imagine. The thing that we always approached was, this is the situation, and what are we going to do to solve it? So incorporating and into my thinking was probably the pivotal thing for me, that really taught me to just look for possibilities, explore, don't get down about your situation, certainly be realistic and evaluate what's going on, look for opportunities, look for other possibilities. And so that was probably the founding element of my career.
And doesn't that use of the word "and" allow you to accept the present the way that it's being presented to you? You're not trying to change what is, you're accepting what is, and then "and how will I react or take action on it?" Is that really, I mean, that word sounds like that would frame what's going on, because isn't a lot of I think the word is suffering. A lot of suffering comes from trying to change what is rather than accepting what is and reacting to it?
Right. Yeah. It's what I call rational optimism. So you look at it realistically, you understand what you're dealing with, and then you're optimistic enough to believe that there are possible solutions, or that you can deal with it either way. And that's a great framing of that, of and when you're doing that, you're not going off into pie in the sky naivete. At the same time, you're not down and like, oh, we can't do this. It's really, you know, properly assessing the situation, understanding what your challenges are, and looking for ways to solve that or deal with it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you for the story, Brad. Great question. And who knew we'd get such a great answer out of that question? So thanks, Brad. I appreciate it. One of the tips that people talk a lot about for focus and mindfulness is the Pomodoro technique. Can you talk about what that is, if you recommend it to people, and how we could incorporate it into our workday?
Yeah, I love the Pomodoro technique. It's one of those things. It's funny. The name literally it means tomato, right? And it's based on a tomato timer. You've all seen them. Like, you get the clock and you turn it, and but the technique is really to commit to a 25-minute segment of time of focused work, and you use the timer so that it tells you what you're doing, and you eliminate all other distractions. The way I've done it, I would shut down everything on my computer except maybe what I needed to be working on. So if I needed to Word document up or whatever, and then because it's such an intense 25 minutes, and you've committed to doing only that, you take a 5-minute break, and then you do another segment, and then you take a 5-minute break and another segment, as many as you can do, recognizing that when you try and work through something for too long, your brain actually begins to do subroutines or shut down parts, and your productivity drops dramatically. Taking that 5-minute break gives you an opportunity to have that focus time, rebuild the brain, maybe re-energize the carbohydrates, fresh carbohydrates, and then moving on. And I'll give you an example of when I've used the Pomodoro technique. So when I was running a continuous improvement program at Northwestern Mutual, at one point in time, we were ramping up so quickly that I had, I think it was 32 direct reports. Yeah, not recommended, by the way. But so I had to do their reviews. Well, reviews are always challenging anyway, right? Because you want to do good things, and you've got parameters, you've got organizational requirements, and all that stuff. And I would just sit there and stare at the screen for a while. And finally, I just said, all right, I'm going to do Pomodoro. I'm going to commit to doing 25 minutes. Everything else is off. Everything is shut down. I'm closing my door. I think I had noise canceling headphones. Other than that, there was no device support. And I put a 25-minute timer on. And I would say that I had probably piddled and farted around for a couple weeks and gotten about 1.5 done. And in, I'm going to say 4 segments, I was able to get the vast majority of the reviews done, to the point where I then went back over and tweaked each one. It's an amazing, amazing technique, and it's almost forced mindfulness, if you will. And it's a very supportive technique for building your mindfulness skills. So to Ariel's question earlier, you have meditation, but also mindful moments where you're really training your brain to respond to things in a focused way, and then getting a reward for it, right? Rewarding yourself with the completion of those reviews. That was a huge thing for me.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer and a bad practitioner in what you're talking about. Like, I totally get this. And I feel like, at least for myself, I work as long as I do because I do, not because I need to. And if I were to incorporate these types of techniques and this kind of purpose, I wouldn't have to work on Friday. Like, I have that feeling like I would not have to be here 6, 7 days a week doing what I'm doing if I was as disciplined as what you're coaching us on. And I really appreciate that. Last question that I have for now is, if we're not being mindful at work, if we're mailing it in, we're not showing up and being present, what are some of the warning signs? When do we know this is something we really need to get on?
Sure. One is a certain level of stress, or you're just feeling that clutter, the butterflies in your head, right? Another is actually boredom. If you're bored at work, even if you're busy, you could feel bored. That's a real trigger. That's a real indicator that you're not being mindful. Another is if you're hard pressed to identify what you've accomplished at the end of the day, if you can look back on that. Another one is when you get home, what's your patience level with your family? You know, what is your how full is your cup, right? To be able to roll with that and be with them and not snap at. Zig Ziglar used to have a thing he talked about, kicking the dog, and it basically was a guy went through the whole day of all these interrupts and bad moods, and his energy was being drained, and he went home and saw the dog and he kicked the dog. And Ziegler's thing was, he should have just kicked the dog at the beginning of the day. Just start with that and get it out of the way. But it's that same thing. So if you're not able to be, there for your spouse, your kids, your dog, whatever, if you're irritable, if things really bother you. So I know when I was going through a period where I was distracted, the drive home was horrible. Every idiot on the road, right? I was probably one of them that cut you off. If that's really important, you need to be a little more mindful. You need to back off. If those kinds of things are raising your blood pressure, things that really don't matter, those are all indicators.
Yeah, I love and hate those warning signs all at the same time.
Oh, I
I
know
have
it,
to tell
right?
you, because I can totally relate with every one of those. But I love the way that you framed it. How full is your cup at the end of the day? Do you have something to share? And if you don't, then you've got work to do. I really like that. A couple of quick questions before we wrap up here. And again, I could talk to you for 9 hours. Those 9 hour podcasts, I could talk to you for 9 hours, but we don't have time for that today. But we do have a few more questions from the group. For those who are a believer and not a practitioner, where do you recommend we start as a first step?
Oh, a believer in in
In mindfulness and
my old
looking
mindfulness.
to move into our purpose and mindfulness more of what you're talking about.
Sure. I really like the work of John Kabat-Zinn, Zinn. He has a number of audiobooks that are very good about just introducing the concepts of mindfulness. And I appreciate what Zinn does because it doesn't attach to anything that you have to be anything else, right? It has no connection to any religious practices or any other thing. So if you just want to understand this and explore it on its own, he has a very good method for that. And honestly, it's something as simple as he does this wonderful exercise on a raisin. If you take a raisin and you just look at it and you you stare at it for a while and you look at the wrinkles of it and then you put it in your mouth and you taste it. And I literally never paid that much attention to raisins except that they came in a little box and you could shake them and you could throw like 20 in your mouth. It's transformative, frankly, to invest in that. But that's the kind of thing, introductory sort of practices, breathing and counting to 10 and thinking about only those breaths and that counting. It's almost impossible to do when you're first starting out. You're going 1, 2. Wait, after I get off this call, what are the 3 things I got to do? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Did I say everything Pat asked me to talk about? You see where I'm going?
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to do. But it's that practice. So I mean, even something as simple as that, acknowledging the thought, acknowledging that it may be something you need to deal with later, and then returning to breathing. Those are the easiest and the most, I think, productive ways to get started. And oftentimes that's enough for many people too.
Well, I got to tell you, if you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, Dave's given us some ideas today to be more present, more mindful, and to enjoy our day more, frankly. And if you're curious about living your purpose, getting into Ikigai, if you can find a way to get in front of Dave Marlow, I highly recommend it because this guy just blows my mind every time I talk to him. Always a pleasure. Dave Marlow, founder of Vluru LLC. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, my great pleasure.
That's great. Okay, so we've got a few announcements before we head off to the Quick Trip networking after party, which again, 2 weeks in a row, the conversation was so good. It's not going to be very long, but we'll be able to check in with one another. So we've got an exciting new initiative that we launched over the weekend. The Idea Collective has put into the field a Midwest small business survey. You ever watch TV and you see the, prognosticators and the newsmen and women say something about small business and you're like, that's not how it is. Where did you get that? Well, we're going to try and counteract that by launching a survey about small business awareness and optimism. And we're going to try and kick it out every single month. So we're launching the survey right now, and we're looking for Midwest small business owners to take the survey. It takes all of about 14 seconds to take the survey. Basically, what's going on in the business and how are you feeling about the next 6 months? And then we're going to track the information and release it to the media. The best part of all of this is, and I'm telling you as sure as I'm sitting here, there's no creepy tracking mechanisms going on. I don't need your email. I don't need your phone number. I'm looking to get as many responses as we can because, as data nerds on the phone would point out, I will not indicate who those data nerds are, but we love them. The more responses, the better the information. So if you are willing to take time, hit the link that was just shared in the chat. We would love to have your information. And if this becomes a thing, which I'm going to try and make it a thing, we're going to make this a calling card of the Idea Collective to help inform everyone about how Midwest and eventually nationwide small business is doing. Also, we're having some fun because we launched another Quick Trip contest, another no strings attached, let's have some fun giveaway. It's a spring break road trip contest. Enter the contest. You could win a fresh pair of Moai sunglasses of your choice and a $50 Quick Trip card to get your goodies and gas so you can head out on the open road because leaving the house right now sounds amazing. So hit the link, put your name in the box, and you could win. Lastly, one more new feature. The Pat Miller Show is off and running at patmillershow.com. I launched a new show where I'm offering free laser coaching to small business owners, one by one, live without a net. So you can get involved and get on the show by hitting the link and reserve your time to get on and get a little bit coaching. But also, I'm adding a new feature starting tomorrow. I want people to send in their wins because, as you know, by being an Idea Collective member, it's so important to celebrate when good things happen. And I'm convinced many small business owners don't do that enough. So we've put a new form up on the website where you can tell us about a big goal that you achieved or something you overcame, and we'll tell that story on the air to inspire others. So send in your wins, reserve your spot, or catch the podcast. All of that can be found at patmillershow.com. Last thing, how about a free year in the Idea Collective? You know, our friends at Bank 59 are giving you that opportunity. Hit bank59.com/Idea Collective if you want 12 months in the coolest small business support group around. Thank you, Bank 59. A big thank you to Dave Marlow from Vluru LLC for coming on today. Next week, big show. We're going behind the scenes at Shark Tank with a local couple who invented the Hug Sleep Pod. So they've appeared on Shark Tank twice this year. They scored a deal with Lori and Mark Cuban, and they are literally selling millions of dollars of product. So next Monday at 3 o'clock, we will hear from Matt and Angie, the founders of Hug Sleep, who are right here in the Milwaukee Metro on Idea Collective Live. As always, a shout out to Jennifer Buchholz, who's producing the call. She's the ultimate connector and my business BFF. And of course, thanks to Bank 59, Serendipity Labs, and our new partner, Quick Trip. The Quick Trip after party and networking for connection and inspiration and, a couple of jokes. It's starting right now. Look out for the Idea Collective YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming shows. I'm Pat Miller, the Idea Coach.